Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Turrell Fund, a foundation serving children. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, moving the region through air, land, rail, and sea. New Jersey Sharing Network. Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Valley Bank. PSEG Foundation. Johnson & Johnson. The Fidelco Group. And by New Jersey Institute of Technology. NJIT makes industry-ready professionals in all STEM fields. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ. And by Meadowlands Chamber, building connections, driving business growth.
This is One-on-One.
I'm an equal American just like you are.
The way we change presidents in this country is by voting.
A quartet is already a John. It's just the new John.
January 6th was not some sort of violent, crazy outlier.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
I mean, what other country sends comedians over to embedded military to make them feel better?
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
It's not all about memorizing and getting information. It's what you do with that information.
Start talking right now.
Such a good question. High five.
Hi, everyone. Steve Adubato. This is Yankee Week, and that is Neal Shapiro, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the WNET Group. Neal, just remind folks, if they missed the first night of Yankee Week on One-on-One, what are we doing and why?
We're celebrating the greatest Yankees of the greatest team ever assembled.
So there it is. Very concise and to the point. Neal, today or tonight here on One-on-One, we feature first the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto, and then Yogi Berra. A little bit about the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto, why he's such an important Yankee.
You know, people, I think, sometimes underestimate how important the position is, how important shortstop is. And especially then, a time where it was sort of both the defensive linch point of the infield and a guy who kept the offense rolling. And second, I think nobody was more beloved in the sense that he was not built like a Major League Baseball player. He was short. Some teams said he couldn't make it. And yet, through both, I think, talent and determination, he was one of the best bunters and the best shortstops of his time.
Yeah, and Phil Rizzuto did not make the Hall of Fame right away. It took him a while, right, Neal?
Right, the Veterans Committee put him in.
The Veterans Committee, and so we're going to be talking with Josh Rawitch, who's the president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. That was an interview we did a couple of years back. You'll see that. And talk about Yogi Berra, who is featured. We talk about the late, great Yogi Berra because I interviewed Lindsay Berra at the Tisch studio a couple of years back in Lincoln Center, WNET studio. Neal, you watched the interview with Lindsay Berra, who knows baseball, who was obviously loved their grandfather a lot and understood why he was great. Why is Yogi so important?
You know, he's important. His personality sometimes diminishes, but how great a baseball player he was. I mean, several times MVP because his defense was great. He was an incredible hitter. I mean, people forget, he struck out once 13 times in the entire season. He had incredible bat control. He played for a very long time, and he was also a great giving baseball player. He helped to nurture the next generation that followed him. And then beyond that, he was a successful coach and manager. So quite a career for Yogi Berra.
You know, as we go into these interviews, one of the things that you're going to pick up, and Neal knows this as a historian of the Yankees, is that unlike in the first show, we were talking about Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, Neal said they respected each other. They're not best friends. These two, Phil Rizzuto and Yogi Berra, really tight. Why does that matter, Neal?
You know, I think it matters because we forget that baseball, while it's a game, it also takes up so much of their lives. So they're spending from February to October together, back then on long train rides. And then also it's a time when the money was not what it is now. So remember, people were working in the offseason. They had a bowling alley together. Right? So these families were close-knit. They spent a lot of time with each other, and they depended on each other. Even when players came to the Yankees, the veterans would say, you know, don't fool around with my bonus money. I'm counting on that. That's how important that time was. So being close-knit at a time when there's a lot of pressure made those guys very special.
Yeah, Neal talked about that bowling alley as a kid. Rizzuto Berra bowling on Route 3 in Clifton, New Jersey. It was, they'll never have anything like that again. So first, we talk with Josh Rawitch, president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, talking about the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto, and then Lindsay Berra, who is a great sports writer and reporter about sports, talking about her grandfather, Yogi Berra. For Neal and myself, you'll see Neal and I on the back end teasing what's coming up tomorrow night on Yankee Week here on One on One. Check out the Scooter and Yogi. Where does Scooter come from, the name?
Really, basically, an early coach gave it to him based on the way he played. He was a little guy who was fast, and the way he moved around the infield, he got the nickname Scooter, and it stuck for his entire playing career.
And, you know, as an obsessed Yankee fan back in the day, Phil Rizzuto, Yogi Berra, Mickey Mantle, all of them, it's interesting that a lot of the Yankee greats, big sluggers, home runs, Babe Ruth, et cetera, Mickey Mantle, as I said, hit his shot almost going out of the stadium in right field. Rizzuto, 5'6", diminutive, but his greatest contribution was what?
Well, it's funny in two different ways. Certainly when you're talking about his playing days, he was really the crux of it. You think of what a shortstop does. He was incredible defensively. He was a great bunter. And people like Ted Williams said, when you look back at those championship teams, that was the glue that kept the team together. That was the most important part of it. So, yeah, I think a lot of people look at home runs and big swings and big pitchers, but Rizzuto is one of these guys who won 5 in a row. It's almost unheard of nowadays.
You know what's interesting is, as you talk about the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto, and Hall of Fame, we'll put up the website. People can check out the artifacts. We're about to show some of Phil Rizzuto's artifacts that are in the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. And if I have this wrong, tell me, Josh, 15 times he was put up for the Hall of Fame, not voted in. But then you mentioned Ted Williams. Ted Williams, the great Ted Williams, batted 400, the last player to bat, if I'm not mistaken, 400. Rod Carew did or did not?
He didn't get there. He's very close.
398, I believe it was. So here's the question. What exactly did the great Ted Williams do and say to help get Phil Rizzuto into the Hall of Fame?
Well, I think as you look at the way our process works, the ERA committee is intended so that if the baseball writers don't elect somebody, you kind of have more time to look back at history and see people's contributions. So whether it was Williams or any of the players who played against him, he was truly one of the most beloved figures in the game for 50 plus years. Anytime they raised his profile and spoke about him, it allowed those who then went into, at the time was called the Veterans Committee. They would hear about it. They would understand more about who he was and what he added. And then ultimately, after quite some time, he got himself elected to the hallowed halls of Cooperstown right behind me.
You know what's interesting? Yogi Berra from New Jersey, Phil Rizzuto resided in Hillside, if I'm not mistaken. They had a very close relationship, and particularly at the end. The two of them were there for each other right until the day one of them passed. What was their relationship beyond baseball, and why was it so close? As a kid, I remember the Rizzuto-Berra bowling alley on Route 3 in Clifton, New Jersey. Yeah. Phil Rizzuto, Yogi Berra, business partners, friends, teammates. Talk about them.
Well, it's interesting. Back in the day, you had to have another job because you weren't making enough money. And so I was just not that long ago, about 10 days ago, at the Yogi Berra Museum there in New Jersey and spent some time
Montclair State University.
Exactly, yeah. Spent some time with both Yogi's son and granddaughter. And they just talked about how close that team was. And in particular, those two, as time went on, they basically experienced life together. And if you think about two people there's really nobody more identified with the Yankees maybe than those two over the course of the second half of the 20th century. So to be able to come up together, to win all these championships together, to serve in the military together, to do all the things that they did, and then, not technically together, but at the same period of time, and then ultimately to go on and win championships together, both on the field, as executives, managers, broadcasters, all the things that they did. And then ultimately, as you said, they didn't pass too far apart from each other. They lived very parallel lives and were very good friends.
For those of us who were kids back in the day and remember the Yankee games in the old WPIX, Phil Rizzuto would leave around the 7th or 8th inning, get out of the stadium. You're laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, I got to get out of here. Cora, my wife is waiting for me and I don't want to get caught. Traffic over the GW Bridge, right? By the way, check out our special on the history of the George Washington Bridge. Rizzuto would get over that bridge, beat the traffic, and his famous expression as a Yankee broadcaster on WPIX, go ahead, you say it.
Holy cow.
Where does holy cow come from?
Oh man, he said early on in his life, a high school coach had him do that as a means of not swearing on the field. Um, I
I didn't
couldn't
know
tell you
that.
if that's true. That was his explanation for it. But yeah, it obviously stuck for decades and decades later.
As a broadcaster, we appreciate other styles. His style was unique, was it not?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of stream of consciousness. It was certainly in an era where a lot of broadcasters wanted to be right down the middle and not show too much fandom. He always said, "Look, I'm a Yankee. That's the way it's going to come across." And so he would read fan mail on the air, give birthday shout outs and anniversary, just things that wouldn't fly probably nowadays. But I think he was very relatable. It's why even if he had never had the playing career that he did, as good as he was on the field, the next 40 years as a broadcaster made him still one of the most beloved Yankees of all time and most recognizable New York sports figures of all time.
Josh, as we show the footage of the artifacts, if you will, at the Hall of Fame, describe what's there.
And
The
interesting
Rizzuto
things.
artifacts.
Yeah, I mean, what we have, what's pretty fascinating, we have the Hickok belt was given and still given to the greatest athlete in North America. And so when you talk about figures like Muhammad Ali or more modern times LeBron James, to have Phil Rizzuto win the very first one of those after his MVP season, it gives you an idea
1950?
just how big he was.
Was that 1950?
Yes, it was exactly.
I'm sorry.
So the first time that award was given out, Phil Rizzuto got that. And then among the other things that we have in the museum, we've got spikes of his, which, again, you're not changing those out constantly. You're talking about size 7.5. There's not a whole lot of 7.5 size feet in the big leagues nowadays or back then. And then an amazing glove we have on display here at the museum that we were just looking at it this morning right before I came on the air. And I mean, it looks like it was used for all 10 years. You can tell the number of times that he's gone through and had it repaired. And it's just such a different time now where players will get a new glove, if not every year, multiple times a year, new shoes, multiple times a month. These were not artifacts that turned over very frequently, and we're grateful to have them as part of our collection.
Josh, to you and the team at the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum, cannot thank you enough for providing not just your expertise and insight on the scooter for Rizzuto. You see the book behind me, but also just inviting us into your home. Lindsay Berra, Yogi's granddaughter, also a columnist with MLB.com. Your grandfather was the best.
I agree wholeheartedly.
For so many reasons. When did you know he was Yogi Berra?
I tell people this all the time. Even when he passed away, now just 6 weeks ago, the outpouring of support and how many people knew who he was, I was even amazed by that. So I know he's Yogi Berra, but I know that's his name. When I was a kid, I knew he was the manager of the Yankees. I was old before I realized that he was also a famous person. Like, even into my teens, I didn't realize how famous he was. But when he passed away, that was a major reality check, just realizing how famous he was, how far his reach went. When I say I love my grandfather and someone comes up to me and says, I loved your grandfather too, they mean it. And they loved him as much as I did. And they're not kidding. And that was a really amazing, sobering thing to really understand what his reach was like.
You connect on so many levels. By the way, as we do this program right around Thanksgiving, this will air many times after that, Yogi's just awarded the Medal of Freedom.
Yeah.
Big deal.
It's a really big deal, and we were afraid that we weren't going to get it for him. We started a petition in May around his 90th birthday. We had to get 100,000 signatures on it in the 30-day period that whitehouse.gov gives you to complete those things, and we got them on June 8th, and then some. We got 110,000. But that was on June 8th, and they didn't announce until just this past Monday, November 17th, I think, that he was going to get it. So we were sweating it out a little bit. I am not a little sad about the fact that he's not here to get it himself, but we're still very proud and very happy that he is going to receive the medal.
Lindsay, growing up in Montclair, we're neighbors in town, known each other for a while, and Montclair is a town that, Yogi and Carmen were Montclair, and it's hard for people to understand this. It's because Yogi was also taken in by this entire country. Tell folks who may not appreciate or understand this how they were embraced by everyone in the town, and also Yogi's funeral at Immaculate Conception church. Happens to be a church I know well.
I was talking with Harold Reynolds the other day, and he calls it Yogiville. I live in Yogiville.
He lives,
Yeah, and Harold lives down. He's a neighbor too.
Right.
I think that because my grandparents were such normal folks, Grandpa did everything for himself. He went and got his own coffee.
He used to go to Henry's.
At Henry's Market every morning, got the papers, picked up his own dry cleaning. They ate out a lot, so they were at restaurants. They were very visible, very accessible. So anyone who lived in Montclair has a Yogi story, has a picture with my grandpa, has been to his house. They hand out candy on Halloween. They used to get a horse and buggy outside the house on Thanksgiving, and anybody who wanted to bring their kids could come up, and my grandmother would have them in the house, giving them a glass of champagne. They were just normal folks, really out there, and liked to have fun in the community that they lived in. So yeah, everybody knew him there.
Yeah, talking about taking pictures of Yogi, you've never seen this shot. I was at the opening of the stadium. Take a look at that shot. Yeah. So that's me.
Look at all that hair.
Yeah, I know. Take a look at, that's our son Steven, who is 23 right now.
Wow.
Okay? The opening of the stadium.
Yep.
Right? Yogi Berra Stadium and the museum there. To tell folks what that complex is and tell folks how significant that is at Montclair State University.
So it's the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center. That place opened when I was 21, so yeah, it's 17, 18 years ago now, which is crazy. It is attached to Yogi Berra Stadium, which is where the Montclair State baseball team and the New Jersey Jackals of the Can-Am League, they play there. But the museum is terrific. It serves 20,000 school kids a year, teaches character education programs to basically any age kid that wants to come through, teaches Grandpa's values of leadership, inclusion, sportsmanship, loyalty, being a nice person, and it really has become my grandfather's legacy.
Yeah, by the way, for those of you who've never been to the museum, check it out. It's extraordinary. It really is. A little bit more about your family, your grandmother, Carmen and Yogi were this amazing couple. It was 65 years?
65 years, yeah.
Describe that marriage.
It really is unlike anything I've ever seen. People are not married for 65 years anymore, and they were such an extension of the other. I mean, I'm very happy he did, but I'm amazed that he made it 18 months without her once she passed away. They really were just incredible. She'll say the reason they were married for 65 years was because Grandpa played baseball and was gone for half of those days. But he loved her so much. We have, if anyone ever does come to the museum and you read the love letters that he wrote to her, 1948 on hotel stationery, and they're so sweet and sappy. They say things like, "My dearest darling, I can't go another moment without you. However will I last until I see you again? I went 3 for 4 today."
Hold on. Yogi wrote these
Yogi wrote my grandmother love letters, yep. And they're on like hotel stationery, little, with the hotel seal at the top, in his perfect penmanship for a guy who dropped out of school in the 8th grade. He's got this beautiful script. And my grandmother, for years, wouldn't let us see them. We knew they existed. And when we renovated the museum, we said, "Gram, we're going to have this whole wall, and it's designated for the love letters. Are you going to give them to us?" And it took to the last minute, but she did. She turned them over.
You have been into sports, and you know sports. You write about it. You understand it on a lot of levels. I'm going to, if you could, as a obsessed Yankee fan, and our president, Neal Shapiro, will appreciate this as well, and all Yankee fans will appreciate this, and those who love Yogi. I'm going to throw out some names.
Okay.
Who I know people who Yogi had close relationships with, and I want you to talk about it.
Okay.
And the first that is a powerful relationship is Phil Rizzuto. Talk about it.
Phil Rizzuto is my father's godfather. My dad, Larry, is my grandparents' oldest son. They became friends, right when Grandpa got to New York. Grammy was really good friends with Cora Rizzuto. They opened a bowling alley together.
The Rizzuto Barra Bowl on Route 3.
Lanes, where Romance Emporium was, right? Yeah,
Clifton, New Jersey.
Yeah, Clifton. Yeah, they were great friends for forever, and my uncles and my dad were friends with all the kids, and yeah.
Is it true that when Phil Rizzuto was in an assisted living facility very late in his life, that Yogi used to go and visit him, they'd play cards, and Yogi would wait until Phil would fall asleep? Yep.
I think he was doing it once or twice a week there at the end. They were buddies. They just...
Like for real?
Oh, for real. And all of those Yankee teammates, they were close, those guys. And my grandmother, by the way, did the same for Cora when she was in assisted living.
Whitey Ford.
Whitey just makes me laugh. He's
Why?
great. Because he's just so funny. He's hilarious. He taught me to line dance when I was a kid at the Hall of Fame. When Stan Musial would play the harmonica, Stan tried to teach me to play the harmonica and declared me useless. So Whitey taught me to line dance, and we would line dance while Stan played the harmonica.
What do you, you were around these people?
Oh, yeah, as a kid, growing up, for sure. They were my grandfather's friends. You were around your grandfather's friends, right?
And he taught you how to line dance, but you couldn't.
No. Well, no, in line dancing, I was okay. I couldn't play the harmonica.
I couldn't play the harmonica.
But no, Whitey was... We saw him at Old Timers Day. My dad is good friends with young Eddie Ford, and I'm good friends with their grandson, youngest Eddie Ford.
Right.
Yeah, just great lifetime friendships there.
I have a picture of Yogi and Elston Howard. I was always struck by that relationship because Elston Howard was the first African-American player with the Yankees. And from what I understand, your grandfather really took him in.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
My grandfather and Ellie were very close, and that relationship went on until Ellie died, and we're also still good friends with Arlene Howard, his wife, Cheryl, his daughter. Grandpa used to go eat at restaurants with Ellie in Florida because Ellie wasn't allowed to go to the white restaurants. I think Grandpa did that. It's really an example of what a special person Grandpa was. He never saw color. Most colorblind human being you'll ever meet in your entire life. He was friends with Jackie Robinson, Elston, Minnie Minoso, the first Black and Latin players, and I always say was on the right side of the color line when it was the wrong place to be, and helped kind of push civil rights in baseball, which in turn did that in the country, which was one of the things I kept saying when we were trying to get him the Medal of Freedom. But his relationship with Ellie was a lifelong friendship, and it didn't matter black or white. The fact that Ellie was his backup for a while and then ended up taking Grandpa's place, none of that mattered. They were just buddies.
You know what's so interesting about the way you describe your grandfather? He didn't speak a lot. I remember the first time I interviewed him one-on-one, before one-on-one came to public television. We were at another network, and he came down with Dale, your uncle. He comes down with Dale, and he does the interview, but he's giving me one-word answers, which I know you're familiar with.
He makes you work hard.
Right, he makes me work really hard, and I'm thinking to myself, Yogi doesn't want to be here. He doesn't really want to do the interviews, and I would see them every once in a while in those situations where if he didn't want to open up, he wouldn't open up. But the fact is, you see, when you talked about him and the civil rights, he was a leader, but he didn't have to make a speech.
No. Grandpa was just one of those. I mean, and I think it's rare and extraordinary, and I don't know that I've seen it again, especially not in another athlete. He just did the right thing all the time because it was the right thing to do. He just had this
he grew
moral
up in St.
compass.
Louis.
You know, he grew up in St. Louis on the Hill. His parents came from Italy. He was born here.
I hate to call it. If I can say, what they call it? They called it Dago Hill.
Yes, they did call it Dago Hill. He grew up down the street from Joe
Garagiola,
right? And Jack Buck, and his brothers worked so Grandpa could quit his job to go play baseball. I think that he felt very fortunate to even have been able to play baseball because they were poor and everybody in the family needed to contribute, and his brothers worked these doubles, so he was able to play. And I think he just knew where he came from, and he was always very grateful for that. And I think his parents taught him about showing respect for people, for other people, for where you came from, for where they came from. And I don't think he had to try very hard at it. He was just a good guy.
A couple other people I want to ask you one more thing. Yeah. I want to make sure I get this question asked. Lindsay, how would you want your grandfather, Yogi Berra, to be remembered?
People ask me this a lot, too. I got a little frustrated when they had the MLB, had the 4 guys on the field at the All-Star game, and it was, I'm going to mess it up, it was Hank Aaron, Sandy Koufax, Johnny Bench, and Willie Mays. And they had them as the 4 greatest living players. And I said, wait a minute, where's Grandpa? I mean, he won more World Series than these guys combined. And, you know, the stats are there, what's going on? And the problem is that younger people who vote online didn't see Grandpa play, and they don't quite remember his impact on the field. And I would love for them to remember some of those amazing stats that he had: 597 at-bats and 12 strikeouts in 1951. That's insane. Ryan Howard strikes out 12 times in a weekend, right? So, like, those things I would love for them to remember. But really, I think Grandpa's legacy is what we teach at the museum, that being great on the field is fine, but being a good person is the most important thing. And I always say, if if people that know who he was just kind of think about how he would behave, and they're nice to their neighbors and good to everyone they meet and show people the same kind of respect, his legacy is in that behavior, and he will live forever.
So there you go. Lindsay Berra talking about the great Yogi Berra. Let's tee up tomorrow night. Night number 3, Yankee Week here on One-on-One. We feature the greatest African-American, the greatest Hispanic, and the greatest Asian. And again, I know there's going to be debate about this, but the greatest. Why is that so significant? And we're also talking about the boss, George Steinbrenner, and a little bit about Joe Torre, who I did an interview with a few years back. Neal, we need to recognize these players from diverse backgrounds who often get ignored, starting with the great Elston Howard, the first Yankee, African-American Yankee. Neal.
And the Yankees were late to the game, if you look at other major league clubs in adopting diverse talent. Since then, I think they've been, especially as they try to bring, as you turn to Asian players, they've been the lead about trying to bring more of those players in. And I think what they recognize is not just it's great for the game, but it's part of what makes Yankee Stadium so much fun, is New York City is in itself an incredibly diverse community. And when you see great baseball players there, and you can also see Puerto Rican flags and Dominican flags and Japanese logos, the fact that it brings out people's ethnic pride, not just in being a Yankee, but being part of our city great, that's also what makes it terrific.
Well said. For Neal Shapiro, myself, and all the Yankee fans, and those who wish they were Yankee fans, Yankee Week here on One-on-One. Make sure you check us out all week. Tomorrow night, the greatest African-American, Latino, and Asian players, and also the boss, George Steinbrenner, and Joe Torre. Yankee Week on One-on-One.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the Turrell Fund, a foundation serving children, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, New Jersey Sharing Network, Hackensack Meridian Health, Valley Bank, PSEG Foundation, Johnson & Johnson, the Fidelco Group, and by New Jersey Institute of Technology. Promotional support provided by Insider NJ and by Meadowlands Chamber.
A cancer diagnosis changes everything.
So does where you go for treatment.
Where other cancer centers offer radiation, at Hackensack Meridian John Theurer Cancer Center, we're utilizing the world's most advanced precision radiotherapy
that can pinpoint and destroy your cancer.
Some perform clinical trials, but we have one of the nation's most rapidly growing drug discovery programs.
Providing hope with the medicine of tomorrow.
New Jersey's best cancer center. Know the difference.